Okay, let's untack this. The world runs on batteries. We all know that. But, I mean, we are undeniably hitting the physical ceiling of current lithium-ion technology.
Yeah, absolutely. We feel it every day, right?
We do.
Yeah.
The limitations are, well, they're pretty obvious. That persistent range anxiety with electric vehicles, the heavy power packs weighing down our devices. There's just this desperate need for real breakthroughs in energy storage.
Exactly.
So today, we're doing a deep dive into what might come next. We're looking at these radical next-generation chemistries that could maybe shatter those limitations. Lithium-sulfur, or Li-S, and lithium-oxygen, Li-O2, batteries.
And the material you shared, this comprehensive R&D brief, it really lays out the ambitious path for these technologies. It focuses heavily on something called conversion chemistry.
Right, conversion chemistry, different from what we have now.
Totally different. They're designed specifically to break that energy density barrier, the one that's kind of capped commercial Li-on for years.
So our mission for this deep dive, what are we trying to get out of this brief?
Well, it's critical, really. We need to systematically understand the huge theoretical promise of these systems. That's the carrot. But also the complex and honestly often frustrating electrochemistry. That's often the Achilles heel, isn't it?
I don't like it.
And then look at the cutting-edge global research that's trying to solve all these issues. We're going to go chapter by chapter, just like it's laid out in the source document.
Okay, chapter by chapter. And when we talk about breaking barriers, these numbers, they really shift your perspective. Let's just set the stage with the sheer scale of this potential upgrade.
Yeah, the numbers are pretty wild.
Commercial Li-ion batteries today, you're generally stuck in the, 100 to 200 watt-hours per kilogram range?
That's about right, yeah, the standard.
But the theoretical specific energy of lithium-sulfur, that jumps, dramatically, up to 2,600 waste kilograms.
Theoretically, yes, that's a key word.
And the truly mind-bending figure, lithium-oxygen, it's a staggering 13,000 waste kilograms if you're just basing it on the mass of the lithium part.
13,000? It's almost hard to grasp that potential. I mean, a possible 10x to maybe even 65x improvement. That's the central gravitational incentive, right? It's driving billions in global research funding. US, EU, Japan, China. Everyone's chasing this.
Yeah, this isn't about squeezing another 5% out of the old tech.
No. This is aiming for a foundational engineering and chemical revolution in, how we store energy.
So let's start with that context of urgency. The source material hits this head-on in its opening section. Why are our standard, 100 to 200 WasteHG batteries just insufficient for what we need in the 21st century?
Well, it really boils down to two big pressures: global electrification and, frankly, physics.
Electrification first, then.
The global shift toward electric vehicles is probably the biggest single driver. You look at the U.S. Advanced Battery Consortium, the USABC, they set this strategic goal years ago. EVs need to hit a driving range of 500 kilometers on one charge.
500 kilometers.
Yeah. Now compare that to an average electric car today using standard Li-ion chemistry. Often, they can only manage about, 160 kilometers before you're looking for a charger?
Yeah, that sounds familiar.
So that massive gap, 340 kilometers of missing range, that's the fundamental deficit we absolutely need to overcome.
And the physics part. The problem is that Li-ion is already getting close to its theoretical limit, isn't it?
It really is that basic intercalation chemistry where lithium ions just kind of slip in and out of these crystalline cages. It can only hold so much energy per unit of mass. We can polish the technology, tweak it here and there, but we can't fundamentally change its capacity enough to give us that exponential leap we need.
The leap needed for truly competitive electric transport. And other demanding stuff too, I guess.
Precisely. And that's exactly why we have to turn to these completely new conversion chemistries. The brief outlines the specific next-gen targets the whole industry is focused on.
Okay, what are they?
For the Li-S battery, the theoretical energy is 2,600 WaS kilograms. But researchers are setting a really aggressive practical target of hitting 800 WaS kilograms.
800 practical. That's, wow.
Even at 800, we're looking at maybe a 4-fold improvement over today's best commercial Li-ion cells. That's huge.
And lithium oxygen. Its theoretical potential is almost unbelievable, like you said. What's the practical hope there?
Well, even after you account for all the necessary bits and pieces, the catalysts, electrolytes, protective layers, all that stuff, the practical specific energy is still expected to reach maybe 1,700 Wh/kg.
1,700. That would completely redefine certain fields, wouldn't it? Like aerospace?
Oh, absolutely. That kind of leap would be transformative. And the initial applications for these high-density breakthroughs, they're clearly defined in the source material.
Right. What are they looking at first?
Well, obviously, lighter, smaller, portable electronic devices. We'd all love that. But the really big economic impacts, they'll be from a massive increase in the range and power of mainstream electric vehicles and, crucially, unmanned aerial crafts, UAVs.
Ah, drones and the like.
Exactly. The potential for longer flight times with LIS, well, we'll get into this shortly, but it's already setting world records in that specific field. It's a tangible benefit right now.
Okay, let's pivot now. Let's dedicate our focus to lithium-sulfur, just like the source does in its second section. Starting with the history. I mean, sulfur wasn't exactly a new idea, was it?
Not at all. We know elemental sulfur was patented as a cathode material way, way back in 1962.
So if the theoretical density was so high even then, why did it kind of flop initially? What went wrong?
Well, the initial development ran into three major sort of interconnected chemical roadblocks, barriers that researchers back in the mid-20th century just couldn't overcome with the tech they had.
Okay, barrier number one.
Conductivity, or rather the lack of it. Elemental sulfur itself and its final discharge products, these things called polysulfides and lithium sulfide, they're highly insulating, basically electrical dead zones.
So no current flow means no battery. Simple as that.
Pretty much, yeah. Makes it impossible to pass current efficiently. Then the second issue, and this is maybe the most famous one, the notorious polysulfide shuttle effect.
Ah, yes, the shuttle. We'll definitely need to unpack that one later.
We will. But essentially, it caused the battery to continuously self-discharge, like a leak. And third, they just couldn't control the extremely unstable nature of the lithium metal anode during charging and discharging, all that dissolving and replating. It led to rapid, irreversible failure.
Okay, so insulating materials, self-discharge, unstable anode. Sound like a recipe for failure.
It was. And because these fundamental problems weren't really solvable with, say, 1990s technology, research attention shifted. It went towards more stable sodium-sulfur systems and, critically, the Li-ion intercalation systems that we all rely on today.
But the brief makes it really clear there's been this massive, globally coordinated resurgence in LIS research recently.
Oh, absolutely. Driven by that urgency we talked about hitting global EV targets, meeting 21st century energy storage demands. And this resurgence, it's backed by major global money.
Like who?
We see Japan's NEDO setting targets, the EU's Horizon 2020 program investing heavily in LIS research specifically for electric vehicles. Significant investment from the U.S. Department of Energy, too. And companies, like Sion Power and Oxis Energy, they're now key players really pushing this material science forward.
Okay, so there's momentum. If we look at the list of advantages in the brief, what makes LIS so attractive besides just the energy density? What are the key selling points for, say, industry?
Right. The source lays out, I think, 6 distinct advantages that make LIS look really attractive commercially.
6. Okay, let's take them off.
First, the obvious one, high specific energy. Translates directly to lighter gadgets, longer usage times. We covered that. Second, and this is really crucial for actually getting it to market.
What's that?
The chemistry seems to be compatible with existing Li-ion production lines.
Oh, wow. That's huge.
It is. It significantly lowers the scale-up risk and, the tremendous capital investment needed for manufacturing. You don't necessarily need entirely new factories built from scratch.
That is a colossal commercial advantage. Makes the path to market way smoother if you can adapt what you already have.
Definitely. Third, LIS boasts this incredibly wide operating temperature range. We're talking from a freezing $40 circ test all the way up to a hot $80 circ test 6. How does that compare to Li-ion?
Well, you have to compare that to Li-ion, which really struggles below maybe $220 circ and starts showing performance issues above $80 circ. So this wide range makes LIS potentially perfect for things like aerospace, deep sea stuff, or high altitude applications.
Okay.
Fourth, it seems to have an intrinsic safety mechanism.
Yeah.
Those polysulfide species, the ones that cause the shuttle problem, well, when they react with the lithium anode, they actually seem to slow down the formation of those dangerous, spiky lithium dendrites.
Wait, so the villain might actually help with safety? That's fascinating.
It's kind of ironic, isn't it? It functions like a chemical buffer, temporarily mitigating that dendrite formation which plagues all lithium metal anodes. Fifth, the low cost of sulfur. That's a massive economic plus. Where does sulfur come from?
It's basically an industrial byproduct, readily available, super abundant in the Earth's crust, and way cheaper than the nickel or cobalt you need for traditional Li-ion cathodes.
Makes sense. And number 6.
And sixth, Li-S cells are often just easier to manage operationally. They seem to tolerate overcharge and over-discharge better than sensitive Li-ion cells, which need those complex battery management systems, BMS, to keep them safe and balanced. Hashtag 2.2 principle and clarification.
All right, now let's move into the messy part, the complex engine of the Li-S battery. The electrochemistry itself, as the brief describes it, the core reaction looks simple on paper. Sulfur plus 2 lithium ions makes a basic 2-electron reaction.
Yeah, it looks simple.
But the brief immediately clarifies it's anything but simple in practice.
Right. We have to understand we've moved from that relatively clean geometric intercalation chemistry of Li-ion.
Or things just slot in neatly.
Exactly. To the dynamic, dissolved, and highly reactive conversion chemistry of Li-S. During charge and discharge, sure, plus IDOS shuttle between the anode and cathode, but the reaction doesn't happen in one clean step. No. It involves this complicated series of intermediate products. They're called polysulfides, or PS. We write them as text sulfur atoms, where that little n can be up to 8. So you have these chains of sulfur atoms.
8 sulfur atoms linked up.
Okay. And these different length chains, they all coexist in the electrolyte at the same time, constantly reacting with each other and with the electrodes.
It sounds less like an orderly chemical reaction and more like a chaotic chemical soup.
That's actually a pretty good description. And this chaos, it manifests directly in the battery's performance profile. Specifically, you see it in the discharge curve, the voltage profile.
How so?
Well, because it's this tiered conversion process, the discharge happens in 3 distinct stages. And you see these as 3 different plateaus on the voltage curve. It clearly shows the varying reaction kinetics involved.
3 plateaus. Tell me about them.
Okay, you start with fast kinetics at the upper plateau. That's generally between, say, 2.4 and 2.55 volts. That's where the initial sulfur, the text-8 rings, convert into these long-chain soluble polysulfides like text-Li-D.
Soluble is key there, I bet.
Absolutely. Then you move to medium kinetics around 2.1 volts. And finally, you hit the lower plateau, maybe 2.1 down to 1.5 volts. This part is characterized by slow kinetics. That's where those chains convert into the final solid short chain products, text-Li-Do and ultimately text-Li.
And that slow final conversion, that's where capacity can get bottlenecked, I imagine.
It often is, yeah. But one of the big hopes for Li-S wasn't just the energy density, it was also the potential power output, right? How fast you can get the energy out. How does the chemistry support high power?
Good question.
Well, the potential for high power comes down to the rate determining step, the ultimate speed limit of the whole cell. In traditional Li-ion batteries, that speed limit is how fast the text-Li plus ionolars can diffuse through the solid crystalline cathode materials. And that solid state diffusion, it's relatively slow.
Right, pushing through a solid takes time.
But in Li-S, the rate determining step actually shifts. It becomes the diffusion of those polysulfides, the PS, in the liquid electrolyte. And this liquid diffusion is often significantly faster than the solid-state diffusion in Li-ion.
Ah, okay. So the bottleneck shifts from being stuck in a solid to moving through a liquid, which gives it an inherent speed advantage.
Precisely. This means Li-S has the potential for very high specific power. That makes it attractive for applications needing both high energy storage and rapid energy delivery. Think like quick acceleration in an EV or a fast ascent for a UAV.
Okay, the moment we talk about conversion chemistry dissolving things, we'll run head-on into the biggest technical roadblock for Li-S, right? The polysulfide shuttle.
The infamous shuttle, yeah.
Let's really delve into this insidious mechanism. The source describes it in detail. What exactly is the shuttle mechanism, and why is it so incredibly damaging to the battery?
Okay, imagine that chaotic chemical soup we just talked about.
Got it.
The shuttle is basically a continuous parasitic loop. It just wastes energy and actively destroys the cell components. Here's how it works. Those long-chain polysulfides, like text-3, they get created at the cathode during charging and discharging.
Okay.
And because they are highly soluble in the common ether electrolytes used, they dissolve, and then they diffuse across the separator and through the electrolyte, traveling all the way over to the lithium anode on the other side.
So they're basically escaping the cathode and making a run for the anode. They're bypassing the desired reaction path completely.
They absolutely are. And once they get to the anode, they react chemically directly with the metallic lithium to form shorter chain polysulfides.
Okay, so long chains become short chains at the anode.
Right. And then those shorter chains diffuse back across the electrolyte to the cathode, where they get reoxidized back into long chains again.
Which then dissolve.
And start the whole trip all over again. It's this continuous self-discharging loop running inside the battery, consuming energy without giving you any useful external work. A constant internal short circuit, chemically speaking.
Wow. Okay, what's the resulting damage from this constant chemical leakage?
The damage is threefold, and it's severe economically. First, it drastically decreases the Coulombic efficiency, sometimes down to 90% or even lower in early research.
Meaning if you put 100 units of charge in, you might only get 90 back out.
Exactly. You lose maybe 10% or more of that charge immediately just to this internal shuttle. That directly impacts the cost effectiveness. The usage profile makes the battery far less competitive.
Okay, that's bad enough. What else?
Second, the shuttle actively consumes both the electrolyte and the active lithium metal itself. It just eats away at the core components, accelerating overall cell failure. And third, this parasitic loop prevents the active sulfur from ever being fully utilized in the main desired discharge reaction. A chunk of it is always caught up in the shuttle, leading to rapid capacity fade over cycles.
That sounds almost insurmountable. How is the global research community even attempting to deal with this constant migration, this shuttle?
Well, the inhibition strategies are pretty comprehensive now. They involve developing novel materials for literally all four cell components. The sulfur hosts at the cathode, the electrolytes, the separators in the middle, and the anodes.
Attacking it from all angles.
Exactly, trying to build multiple layers of defense. Physical roadblocks, chemical roadblocks, anything to confine that polysulfide and stop its migration. It's definitely a multi-component engineering challenge, not just a single chemical fix. Hashtag tech 3.2 capacity fading mechanisms.
Okay. Beyond the shuttle itself, the overall capacity of the Li-S cell just fades over repeated use, like any battery. Let's look at where the battery fails as it cycles. The brief breaks us down. Starting with the anode side. What causes the anode to fade?
Right. Just like in any system that tries to use metallic lithium as the anode, the primary failure mechanism is the lithium dendrite problem.
Dendrites again, those spiky things.
Exactly. During charging, lithium ions deposit back onto the anode surface, but they don't do it evenly. This non-uniform deposition leads to the formation of these dendrites. They look like spiky, mossy structures. And when the battery cycles, bits of these dendrites can break off, shed, and become electrically isolated material. We call it dead lithium.
So it's active, expensive lithium material that's just consumed, lost, without providing any energy.
Precisely. And even though we mentioned earlier that the polysulfides seem to slow down dendrite formation a little bit.
Yeah, that was the weird safety benefit.
Right. But the overall problem persists because the crucial protective layer on the lithium, the solid electrolyte interface, or SEI, it's constantly being compromised.
Why is the SEI so unstable here?
Because metallic lithium undergoes huge volume changes during charging and discharging. It physically expands and contracts quite a bit. This mechanical stress constantly cracks and breaks that thin SEI layer.
And then it has to reform.
Exactly. It has to constantly regenerate. And this continuous cycle of destruction and repair consumes precious electrolyte and active lithium. It's not just consuming material either. This process also causes the battery's internal volume to gradually swell up over time, which is a major mechanical headache and a packaging issue.
Okay, so anode problems. Dendrites, dead lithium, unstable SEI, swelling.
Yeah.
What about the cathode? Moving over to the sulfur side, how does the cathode material itself degrade?
Cathode fading is mainly caused by two things: aggregation and chemical loss. Yeah, the final solid discharge products, the elemental sulfur, the lithium sulfide, and the intermediate textides, they tend to clump together to aggregate into larger, non-reactive particles over time.
And why is clumping bad?
When they clump up, they lose essential electrical contact with the conductive parts of the electrode. They also physically block the porous channels that the textile plus I dollars need to move through to react. So it severely hampers subsequent reactions.
Okay, so aggregation kills access. What was the second part? Chemical loss.
Right. That goes back to the shuttle. The constant loss of polysulfides from the cathode to the anode via the shuttle means that a permanent portion of the active sulfur, maybe 10% to 20% of the total capacity in some cases, just diffuses away permanently and is lost from the system entirely over cycling. It's gone.
Wow, up to 20% just
Gotta go.
lost to the void. Okay, and finally, the electrolyte itself fades. We mentioned it gets consumed by the SEI formation. What are the results of this continuous decomposition of the liquid components?
Well, that continuous reaction between the electrolyte and the highly reactive lithium anode needed to form or repair the SEI causes the overall electrolyte volume to drop dramatically over time. Eventually, you can get what's called electrolyte dryout.
The liquid just disappears.
Pretty much. And as the liquid volume shrinks, the concentration of the remaining polysulfide in that reduced electrolyte volume increases. This causes heavy concentration polarization. Basically, it makes it much harder for ions to move where they need to go, and that prematurely terminates the charge or discharge process. The battery just stops working even if there's active material left.
And the brief also mentions gas generation during this electrolyte decomposition, right? That adds a safety concern.
Yes, absolutely. Gases like hydrogen, methane, and carbon monoxide, CO, are continuously generated as the organic electrolyte breaks down. This increases the internal pressure within the sealed cell, which can potentially lead to mechanical failure, the cell swelling up like a pillow, and critical safety hazards if that pressure exceeds the structural limits of the battery package.
Okay, let's shift our focus now to the cutting-edge solutions researchers are actually pursuing, component by component. Starting with the electrolyte, which you said presents this fascinating chemical challenge, the brief calls it the electrolyte paradox.
The electrolyte paradox. Yes, it's absolutely the tightrope walk for chemists working on Li-S. On one hand, the electrolyte must be a highly efficient transport medium. It needs to shuttle both the Texli plus silars and the polysulfide PS species, effectively,
Why the polysulfides too?
because the sulfur species themselves, S and Texli, are electrically insulating. They need to dissolve and move to the conductive interface to actually react. So transport is essential for capacity.
Okay, so you need PS to move.
But, on the other hand, that same PS diffusion must be strongly confined and inhibited to prevent the shuttle effect from destroying the cell.
You need them to move to deliver capacity, but you absolutely don't want them to move too far or they cause the shuttle.
Exactly. You need them mobile, but only locally near the cathode. It sounds like mutually exclusive goals, doesn't it?
It really does. So what are the leading solvent and additive solutions trying to manage this impossible balancing act?
Well, the sort of standard solvent approach right now is using a mixture of DOL, which is 1-varyl-3-dioxylane, and DME, ethylene glycol dimethyl ether, often in about a 1-to-2 volume ratio. And that's paired with a lithium salt, usually Texli, FISAI, lithium bis-trifluoromethensulfonylamide, that's the baseline.
Okay, and for controlling the shuttle, what additives do they use?
For shuttle control, the best chemical solution found so far, the one most widely used, is the additive lithium nitrate, Texfline-AF3.
Lithium nitrate, how does that work? How does it stop the shuttle?
It basically acts as an in situ protective layer former. It reacts directly with the lithium metal surface and with the polysulfides that reach it. And this reaction forms a dense protective SEI layer that's primarily made of things like Texliote and Kexto and 10-beryl-stone.
And this layer is better than the normal SEI.
Much better, yes. This dense layer is far more effective at physically and chemically blocking further unwanted reactions between those soluble polysulfides coming from the cathode and the lithium anode itself. It kind of seals the anode off from the shuttle.
Okay, that sounds like a good fix. But wait a minute. The brief mentions a really serious safety concern with the Texline 3. It actually likens the cathode mixture to black powder.
Yes. That is a critical point. It really highlights the compromises involved here.
Are we substituting range anxiety for explosion risk? I mean, how much does that compromise commercial viability?
It's a major concern. Texline 033 is a strong oxidant. Now think about a typical sulfur cathode. It contains sulfur mixed with conductive carbon. If you blend carbon, which is a fuel, with a strong oxidizing agent like Texline 033, well, the source material notes the resulting mixture has a composition startlingly similar to black powder. Gunpowder? Yeah. This introduces a severe safety risk during manufacturing and potentially during operation if the materials are handled or mixed improperly or if the cell is abused. Furthermore, even if it's safely contained, that additive, Texlane 033, gets irreversibly consumed at the cathode too, occupying active sites where the main sulfur reaction should happen. So it slightly reduces the overall energy yield.
Okay, so a solution that helps stop the shuttle introduces this massive handling risk and chemical stability issue. Wow. Okay, let's move to the anode. Metallic lithium gives us that crucial, super high specific energy, the brief says, around 600 Wh/degree, potentially for the whole cell. But it's the source of dendrites and instability. What's the research focus for trying to stabilize the lithium metal itself?
The focus is almost entirely on engineering a better SEI layer, one that's flexible enough to handle those volume changes, but also stable enough to prevent continuous decomposition.
How do they do that?
Mostly by carefully selecting the solvent chemistry. For instance, using F-substituted solvents with fluorine in them that tend to promote the formation of a highly resilient LiFeF, lithium fluoride, protective layer in the SEI. They also try increasing the concentration of the lithium salt, like text LiTFSI. Using a concentrated electrolyte seems to help stabilize the anode surface and promote more uniform lithium deposition, reducing dendrites.
What about just getting rid of metallic lithium altogether? Can we move away from it to bypass the dendrite problem entirely?
People are definitely exploring alternatives. Things like lithium alloys or using materials that lithium ions can insert into and extract from, similar to Li-ion anodes, like silicon carbon CIC composites.
Do they work?
They definitely offer better cycling stability. That's a major plus. Fewer dendrites, longer life. However, and this is a big however, the source clearly indicates a critical trade-off. Using these alternatives severely limits the overall specific energy of the battery.
How much energy do you lose?
For example, replacing metallic lithium with a 6M composite anode means the overall Li-S battery capacity might drop from that potential 600 Wh/kg down to only about 370 Wh/kg.
That's a huge hit.
It is. And that loss of energy density significantly reduces the main commercial incentive for switching to Li-S in the first place. You lose a lot of the advantage over standard Li-ion.
Stability versus energy density. The constant compromise in battery design, it seems. Okay, let's turn to the cathode materials now. How do you fix that fundamental problem of sulfur itself being an electrical insulator?
Right. The core strategy here is all about physical confinement and electrical networking. Basically, researchers disperse the insulating sulfur within highly conductive porous carbon hosts, like mixing flour into a metal sponge.
What does that achieve?
Well, the carbon provides pathways for electrons and ions to get to the sulfur. And crucially, the pores in the carbon host help to confine the dissolved polysulfides via something called capillary sorption. It's like a microscopic sponge trapping the liquid PS right where it's needed.
Interesting. Any specific materials stand out?
Yeah, a landmark discovery in this field was the use of something called CMK3 mesoporous carbon. That work really showed that having controlled porosity, specific pore sizes was key.
And the size of the pores matters, right? The brief talks about micropores and mesopores.
Absolutely. It turns out the confinement effect physically trapping the PS is strongest in micropores, which are really tiny, less than 2 nanometers across. They literally hold on to the polysulfide chains.
But you need bigger pores, too.
Right. Mesopores, which are larger, say 2 to 50 nanometers, are also effective at confinement to some extent, but their primary function is simply accommodating the large volume of sulfur you need to pack in to achieve high capacity. So researchers now aim for these complex, hierarchical carbon hosts that have both micropores for strong confinement and mesopores for high sulfur loading, trying to get the best of both worlds.
Now, pure carbon is nonpolar, right? Meaning it doesn't strongly attract the polysulfide molecules, which are polar. How do researchers improve the confinement chemically, make them stick better?
Good point. They apply some clever chemical tricks. One common method is adding heteroatoms, atoms that aren't carbon, like nitrogen N, oxygen O, or even sulfur S itself, to the surface of the carbon host.
What does adding those atoms do?
This process, called doping, increases the polarity of the host material. This makes the polar PS molecules stick to the carbon surface via a stronger chemical interaction, rather than just weak physical forces like in the pores. It improves the binding.
Are there other chemical tricks?
Yeah, another really innovative approach is chemically grafting the sulfur directly onto polymers. For example, making a pan-S copolymer, which involves reacting sulfur with polyacrylonate trial at high temperatures, opening up those Tex rings. This creates strong chemical bonds holding the sulfur in place, which greatly improves stability. The downside is it often results in lower overall sulfur content in the cathode.
Okay, and the brief also mentions these yolk shell structures.
Yeah.
That sounds like miniature armor plating for the sulfur particles. Can you elaborate on that concept?
That's actually a great way to visualize it. Researchers use materials like titanium dioxide, TaO2, or conductive polymers like polyaniline to create a protective shell around a core sulfur particle. But they leave an empty space, the yolk, between the sulfur core and the outer shell.
What's the point of the shell and the gap?
This protective shell is designed to serve 2 key functions. First, it acts as a permanent physical barrier, literally blocking the polysulfides from diffusing out into the electrolyte. Second, that empty yoke space is designed to accommodate the significant volume expansion, about 80% that occurs when the sulfur converts to texide during discharge. This helps keep the overall electrode structure intact during cycling.
Clever. But there's always a trade-off, isn't there?
Always. The drawback, as always, is that these coating materials, like TiO2, are often less electrically conductive than pure carbon. So while you gain stability, you might lose a bit on overall performance, like power capability.
Right. Okay, finally, component 4. The battery separators. These are the literal gatekeepers of the cell sitting between the anode and cathode. What's the fundamental requirement for a separator in a Li-S battery?
It's got a tough job. It must have extremely high Tex Li plus $I conductivity. Gotta let those lithium ions zip through quickly to maintain power. But simultaneously, it needs to possess extremely low polysulfide ion permeability to stop that shuttle dead in its tracks.
And the standard separators used in Li-ion don't work.
No. Traditional microporous polymer membranes, like the ones made from polypropylene, PP, or polyethylene, PE, they just fail here. Their pores are generally larger than the polysulfide ions, so the PS just sails right through them. They offer almost no barrier to the shuttle.
So what are the advanced solutions that actually manage this complex separation task? How do you let Li plus through but block PS?
Researchers are looking at two main categories of advanced separators. One approach is using dense structures, things like vanadium pentoxide, ceramic layers, or membranes based on polyethylene oxide, PEO. These aim to physically block the large PS molecules just based on size or density.
Okay, physical blocking, what's the second approach?
The second, and maybe the most promising from a chemical design perspective, is leveraging something called the charge repulsion effect.
Charge repulsion. Explain that mechanism for us in simple terms. How does that work?
Okay, remember, polysulfide ions are negatively charged. They exist as anions like Tex2 numbers.
Right, negative charge.
So researchers incorporate specific chemical groups like sulfonic acid groups onto Texo3 50-downaril onto specialized ion exchange membranes. These sulfonic acid groups are also negatively charged.
Ah, I see where this is going.
Simple physics, right? Like charges repel. So the fixed negative charges on the membrane actively repel the mobile negative polysulfide ions, effectively pushing them away, steering them back towards the cathode. Meanwhile, the desired positive lithium ions plus attracted, or at least not repelled, allowing them to pass through freely.
That's really clever. Using electrical charge itself to basically herd the ions into their correct lanes.
Exactly. It's a more selective approach than just physical blocking. The source also briefly notes the potential of size sieving using materials with very precisely controlled pore sizes, like metal organic frameworks, MOFs. Since the polysulfide clusters are around half a nanometer, much larger than a single lithium ion, which is tiny, about 3.076 nanometers, you could potentially design a filter based purely on size. Hashtag 3.4 for the research directions for Li-S.
Okay, summarizing the path forward for Li-S then. If we want to hit that ambitious 800 WHKG practical goal, what are the key research areas that need sustained global focus according to the brief?
The source really outlines several key thrusts. First, we desperately need breakthroughs in developing higher performance cathodes. That means finding better catalysts to speed up the reactions, especially that slow final conversion. It also means achieving higher sulfur loading, basically, figuring out how to pack more active sulfur material into the carbon host structure without sacrificing performance. More sulfur equals more energy.
Makes sense. What else on the cathode side?
We also need to get smarter about designing the micro and nanoscale structure of the cathode. We need structures that are optimized for mass transport, making sure Tex Li's plus ionars and electrons can quickly reach all the active sulfur sites, even deep inside the electrode.
Okay, cathodes need better catalysts, higher loading, better structure. What about the difficult anode side, the lithium metal?
Yeah, the challenge remains the metallic lithium anode. Research really has to focus on designing more robust and flexible SEI layers that can withstand that cycling stress without breaking down constantly, and also on developing high surface area current collectors for the lithium to plate onto.
Why high surface area?
If you spread the incoming lithium current over a larger surface area, you reduce the local current density. And lower current density is a known way to suppress or prevent that unwanted dendrite formation. It encourages more even plating.
Okay, so better SCI, lower current density for the anode. But the brief also points out an immediate commercial opportunity, one that kind of sidestepped that big cycle life limitation that plagues the secondary rechargeable market.
That's right. That's the focus on primary batteries. Lithium-sulfur primary cells, the non-rechargeable kind, have already achieved remarkable specific energies in labs and prototypes, exceeding 900 Wei-Cruz in some cases.
100 weight chargers.
Yeah. And since they don't need long cycle life, you just use them once and replace them, they're considered really promising for immediate specialized applications. Think military portable power, long-duration surveillance sensors, specialized scientific instruments, fields where extremely high energy density and low weight are absolutely non-negotiable requirements, even if the battery isn't rechargeable.
Okay, so we've established that Li-S offers these huge potential gains, but is kind of kneecapped by that polysulfide shuttle effect and anode issues. Now let's pivot our focus, just like the brief does in its third section, to the system with that truly mind-bending theoretical potential. Lithium oxygen, sometimes called Li-Air. What's the history here, and why is this technology considered even more difficult than Li-S?
Well, the research actually began way back during the oil crisis in the 1970s, but that very early work was really plagued by the fact that they mostly used water-based electrolytes. And water, as you can imagine, heavily corrodes the metallic lithium anode, just eats it up.
Yeah, lithium and water don't mix well.
Not at all. So the modern electrochemical Li-O2 system wasn't really established until around 1996. That's when researchers started using specialized gel electrolytes to try and stabilize the lithium interface better. But global interest, the real explosion of research, that didn't happen until after 2006 when some higher energy demonstrations proved the basic concept could work. And then you had that famous IBM Battery 500 program launch in 2012, which really captured imaginations, aiming for a 500-mile EV range.
Right, the 500-mile battery dream. Now, the brief classifies Li-O2 into 4 main types based on the electrolyte used.
Yeah.
Why the need for 4 different approaches? What's the deal there?
Yeah, the 4 types, a product organic, all-solid electrolyte, aqueous, and a combined organic-aqueous hybrid, they basically exist because each system is trying to solve a different fundamental stability problem inherent in the Li-O2 chemistry.
Okay, walk us through them briefly. A product organic.
That's the most studied type. It uses organic solvents, no water, but its primary discharge product, lithium peroxide, Text O2, is a solid insulating material that physically blocks the air cathode's reaction sites. It basically chokes the cell to death as it discharges.
Okay, clogging is the issue there. All solid.
All-solid electrolyte is potentially much safer, no flammable liquids, but it suffers from really high resistance at the interfaces between the solid components. It's hard to get good contact and fast ion movement. Plus, the cathode blocking by Text O2 can still happen.
Aqueous. Using water again.
Right. The aqueous system avoids the blocking problem because its discharge product, lithium hydroxide, LOH, actually dissolves in the water, so the cathode stays clear. The huge challenge there is you need a perfectly protected lithium anode to keep the water from reacting violently with the lithium. Very difficult.
And the hybrid tries to combine them.
Exactly. The organic aqueous hybrid system tries to get the best of both. It forms the soluble LiOH product, like the aqueous system, but uses an organic electrolyte near the lithium anode, the catch. It requires a flawless solid electrolyte separator membrane between the water layer and the organic layer. That membrane has to conduct lithium ions but be absolutely impermeable to water and oxygen. Another huge materials challenge.
Wow, okay, so each type swaps one problem for another, it seems. Regardless of the type, what are the major chronic bottlenecks that are plaguing the Li-O2 system right now, according to the brief?
Well, they definitely share that common curse of the metallic lithium anode dendrites, unstable SEI, that's familiar from Li-S, but their unique hurdles are specific and, frankly, severe.
Such as?
First, the extremely high charge voltage required. Often you need over 4.5 volts to recharge the cell, especially to break down that stubborn Text O22, and such high voltages cause rapid decomposition of almost any organic electrolyte.
Okay, high voltage kills the electrolyte. What else?
Well, second, just the fundamental difficulty of managing those solid discharge products. How do you efficiently form and then completely decompose insulating solids like Text Li-O2, Text O2, or even LiOH reversibly, cycle after cycle? It's a major challenge in solid-state electrochemistry. And third, the massive contamination issue from breathing ambient air. We'll get into that.
Let's delve into that research status then. We know that high charge voltage causes the electrolyte to break down. Which electrolytes are preferred now, and what specific breakdown products are they trying to avoid?
Right. Initially, researchers tried using the standard carbonate electrolytes, like the ones in Li-ion batteries, but these were quickly found to be highly vulnerable to attack by reactive oxygen species, particularly superoxide radicals that form during discharge. They just got chewed up.
So carbonates are out. What's in?
Now, ether-based electrolytes, similar to Li-S, and especially DMSO dimethyl sulfoxide electrolytes, are generally preferred because they show higher intrinsic stability against those oxygen radicals. However, decomposition still happens, especially at those high charging voltages.
And what forms when they decompose?
You often end up forming unwanted organic lithium salts, or critically lithium carbonate TXTO33, as detrimental byproducts that coat the electrodes.
Ah, TXTO3, we'll come back to that. Now, to combat that extremely high charge voltage and improve the energy efficiency, the brief highlights the use of catalytic additives or redox mediators. How do these actually work chemically?
These are basically soluble catalysts, things like lithium iodide or a molecule called TTF, tetrathiafulvalene. They're dissolved directly into the liquid electrolyte. And they're designed to bypass the need for that super high voltage by providing an alternate, lower energy chemical pathway for the charging reaction.
How does that work? Like a detour?
Exactly like a detour.
Yeah.
For example, during charging, the redox mediator molecule, say TTF, gets oxidized first at the electrode surface, maybe at a lower voltage like 3.5 V instead of 4.5 V. Then, this oxidized form, TXTTF plus DALE, acts like a chemical shuttle. It diffuses over to the solid insulating TXTO2 discharge product stuck on the cathode. And it chemically oxidizes the TXTO2, breaking it down, while the TXTF plus DALE gets reduced back to TTF. Then the TTF diffuses back to the electrode to start the cycle again.
So the mediator does the hard work of breaking down the TXTO2 at a lower energy cost?
Precisely. It dramatically reduces the charge-over potential. That's the wasted energy difference between the charging and discharging voltages. Makes the whole battery much more energy efficient. Some mediators, like adding Li-I in a bit of water, can even change the discharge product entirely, making Li-OH the stable form instead of TXTO2.
That's a really clever chemical solution to what sounds like a severe electrical problem. Okay, let's talk about the oxygen cathode material itself now. This is where we encounter that killer byproduct you mentioned, TXTO3, lithium carbonate.
Right. The cathode, the air electrode, needs to be porous to let oxygen in and conductive. So researchers often use high surface area carbon materials like carbon black, super P, or Ketchen black. They offer excellent conductivity and lots of surface area, which allows researchers to demonstrate massive initial discharge capacities, sometimes up to an incredible 15,000 milliwatt per gram of carbon.
15,000. That's a huge capacity. But
the critical problem emerges during the charging cycle. That carbon material itself reacts chemically with the main discharge product, TXT2, especially at the high potentials needed for charging. And this reaction forms lithium carbonate TXTO233.
okay, why is TXTO3 formation so bad? Why is it the killer byproduct?
Because lithium carbonate is highly electrically insulating and it's extremely chemically stable. It basically acts like a layer of concrete that forms on and poisons the carbon electrode surface.
It just blocks everything.
It blocks the reaction sites, makes the carbon electrically dead underneath it, and it's virtually impossible to efficiently decompose or remove during subsequent recharges. If too much of this TXTO3 layer builds up, the cell just dies very quickly. It can't breathe anymore.
So the very material you need for high capacity, the carbon, is chemically unstable in the operating environment.
Exactly. This forces researchers to consider using non-carbon materials for the cathode, things like gold nanoparticles or titanium carbide. These are chemically more stable. They don't react to form that poisonous carbonate.
But there's a catch, right?
Always a catch. This stability comes at a significant cost. These non-carbon materials are much heavier than carbon and generally less efficient catalytically. So using them drastically reduces the overall practical specific energy of the battery. You lose a lot of that headline energy density potential.
So stability or high capacity, another one of those fundamental trade-offs. We really need the massive surface area of carbon, but the carbon is chemically compromised in this harsh environment.
Precisely. And that is why catalysts, solid catalysts mixed into the cathode, are considered absolutely necessary for Li-O2. Without them, the high charge voltage you need to decompose both the insulating texto-TXTO2 and any text-TICO3 that forms drives the round-trip energy efficiency way down, often below 70%. That's just not practical.
So what catalysts do they use?
Researchers rely heavily on precious metals like platinum PT, ruthenium RuT, sometimes alloys like IOPT, and also transition metal oxides like cobalt oxide or iron oxide, textopre. The goal is always to reduce that high charge voltage and make the decomposition reactions easier, more efficient.
Okay, catalysts are key. Now, finally, there's that unique challenge for Li-O2 compared to Li-S, which is sealed. Li-O2 has to deal with the air interface itself. It has to breathe oxygen, but only oxygen.
This is a monumental engineering challenge, especially for commercialization. Li-O2 batteries, to get that amazing energy density, must draw oxygen from the ambient air around them. But ambient air isn't pure oxygen. It contains harmful gases, specifically water vapor and carbon dioxide.
And why are those bad?
They react catastrophically with the highly reactive components inside the battery. If water vapor gets through the membrane, it immediately corrodes the metallic lithium anode. Game over. If carbon dioxide gets through, it reacts with the texto2 discharge product to form even more of that dreaded insulating texto2 TXTO3. Also, game over.
So you need a filter that lets oxygen through but blocks water and CO2 perfectly.
Perfectly, and for a long time. What are the material science solutions being explored for this literal air purification problem built into the battery?
The solution lies in developing specialized breathable membranes. Membranes designed to selectively permeate oxygen while rigorously blocking the contaminants. These include some high-tech materials like Teflon-coated membranes or specialized polymer films like proton-doped polyaniline. Creating a membrane that can maintain high oxygen flux for power while guaranteeing a near-perfect, long-lasting barrier against moisture and CO2 over potentially years of operation, that is a major ongoing hurdle for practical Li-Air batteries. Hashtag 4.3 for the research directions for Li-O2. Okay, the source material makes it really clear that Li-O2 is still very much in the early fundamental development phase. It's facing significant scientific gaps. What are the key chemical unknowns we still need to solve before this technology can realistically move forward?
Well, we still lack a truly thorough, fundamental understanding of the exact mechanisms of how those discharge products, texto2 and LiOH, actually grow on the cathode surface and how they decompose during charging. Especially understanding the morphology, the shapes they form, and how that impacts performance under the extreme electrochemical conditions inside the cell.
So we don't even fully understand how the main reaction products form and disappear.
Not at the nanoscale level needed for precise control, no. We also urgently need to fully clarify the formation mechanism and, more importantly, find an efficient elimination mechanism for that deadly TXTO3 byproduct, especially in the aprotic non-aqueous electrolyte systems. If we can't find a way to efficiently remove those insulating carbonate layers during charging, the battery remains effectively non-rechargeable in practice.
Okay, fundamental mechanisms are still fuzzy. Practically speaking, then, what needs to be developed material-wise to move this potentially game-changing technology closer to market?
Material stability is absolutely paramount. We desperately need cathode materials, and especially electrolyte materials, with extremely high stability against both oxygen radicals and high voltage. This might mean moving towards highly stable ionic liquids, which are salts that are liquid at room temperature. They have lower vapor pressures and are generally less reactive than conventional organic solvents.
Ionic liquids.
Okay. The source concludes with a rather sobering comparison. It suggests that successfully developing a commercially viable Li-O2 secondary system, a rechargeable one, might take a similar time frame to the entire development arc of Li-ion technology itself.
Which was how long?
Upwards of 35 years from initial concept to widespread commercialization. So it's likely a multi-decade challenge still ahead for Li-O2.
Wow, a long road.
Given that potential 1,700 waste kg practical energy target, the potential economic benefits for revolutionizing transportation, aerospace, and large-scale grid energy storage are described as essentially immeasurable. It's a classic, high-risk, world-changing reward scenario.
Okay, let's briefly review the few actual success stories and demonstrations mentioned in the application section of the brief. Starting back with Li-S, which is closer to reality, the most successful demonstration seems to have occurred in the unmanned aerial vehicle, or UAV sector, really capitalizing on that high specific energy advantage.
Yes, absolutely. That Scion power demonstration back in 2010 was a crucial milestone. It set a world record for unrefueled flight endurance. They flew a high-altitude pseudo-satellite type UAV powered by a hybrid solar Li-S battery system.
Using the Li-S cells for power during the night, I assume.
Exactly. And it flew continuously for 14 days at an altitude of 70,000 feet.
14 days straight. That is a direct, tangible testament to the high specific energy Li-S offers. The brief says the battery pack itself achieved 260 weightage kilograms. That's significantly better than any equivalent Li-ion pack could have offered back then, right?
Oh, much better. It clearly proves the Li-S technology can meet the demanding technical requirements for these specialized long-endurance UAVs. However, there's a critical caveat mentioned that still limits its immediate, broader utility, even in this niche.
What's the catch?
The flight endurance, even at 14 days, is currently limited by the battery cycle life. While 14 days is a record, for true commercial high-altitude pseudo-satellite applications replacing actual satellites, they need that cycle life to extend to many months, maybe even years, of continuous operation, and Li-S isn't there yet.
Right. Cycle life is still the bottleneck.
Ollie?
What about other sectors mentioned, like solar energy storage or mainstream electric vehicles? Any demos there?
The Dalian Institute of Chemical Physics, DICP in China, demonstrated a fairly large 12 kWh Li-S battery stack specifically for solar energy storage back in 2016. So again, the capacity was there. It showed the technology can be scaled up, but the cycle life was still reported to be below 100 cycles, which is completely insufficient for practical grid storage or home energy storage applications. Those need thousands, maybe tens of thousands of cycles to be economical.
Okay, so not ready for grid storage. And EVs. That 300-mile range goal.
While the 300-mile range goal is certainly achievable with the energy density Li-S offers, that same cycle life limitation still prevents any large-scale demonstrations in actual electric vehicles. You need a battery that lasts for many years and hundreds of thousands of miles in a car.
So the focus for Li-S really remains on those primary non-rechargeable batteries as the most immediate commercial route, given that highly achievable 900 kWh specific energy we talked about.
That seems to be the consensus, yes. Leverage the energy density where cycle life isn't the main driver. Hashtag #tag 5.2, Li-O2 applications and demonstrations.
Okay, now shifting to Li-O2 applications. The brief makes it sound like this is far more nascent, far earlier stage.
It absolutely is. The demonstrations reported focus almost entirely on improving the raw energy density potential, often with little or no regard for rechargeability at all.
So primary cells again?
Primarily primary, yes. The PolyPlus battery company, for instance, demonstrated extremely high specific energy figures, up to 1,300 Wh/kg using a water-based electrolyte, and 800 Wh/kg using air. But the source clearly states these cells were strictly primary. They could not yet be recharged effectively.
So even the headline-grabbing demonstrations for Li-O2 are focused solely on maximizing that non-rechargeable energy density.
Correct. DICP, the same institute in China, also demonstrated a 5 amp-hour Li-O2 primary battery that achieved 526 Wh/kg. Still impressive energy density, but again, primary. The unanimous consensus in the field reflected in the brief is that Li-O2 technology is even more premature than Li-S when it comes to large-scale secondary applications like electric vehicles, despite its vastly superior theoretical energy potential. Hashtag tag 5.3 common challenges and perspectives.
Okay, let's try to summarize the shared difficulties then, drawing from the concluding section of the source document. What are the common enemies, the shared problems that plague both Li-S and Li-O2 development?
The metallic lithium anode. That is the fundamental common enemy number one.
Right, dendrites, SEI instability.
Exactly. Safety issues stemming from that uncontrolled dendrite growth and the unavoidable decomposition of the electrolyte reacting with that highly reactive lithium surface. These are chronic, persistent problems for both systems because both really rely on the incredibly high specific energy of metallic lithium to even achieve their target energy densities in the first place. They're kind of stuck with it.
Any other shared challenges? Or unique ones that are critical?
Well, electrolyte decomposition is a major issue for both, though maybe worse for Li-O2 due to the higher voltages. But for Li-O2 specifically, that unique additional challenge of removing water and carbon dioxide from the incoming ambient air, that remains a formidable, persistent hurdle that Li-S doesn't have to worry about since it's a sealed system.
Okay, so anode stability is enemy #1 for both, plus air purification for Li-O2. Given these shared struggles and different timelines, What's the recommended strategic path forward for commercialization, according to the brief? How should the research community prioritize?
The strategy outline seems to be basically two-pronged. First, focus heavily on primary battery development now, for both systems, but especially Li-S.
Why primary first?
Because it immediately capitalizes on their main advantage, that super high specific energy, over 900 WHKs is achievable for Li-S primaries, remember, while completely sidestepping their main disadvantage, which is short cycle life. This allows for a quicker entry into specialized markets like military tech, aerospace, and niche civilian fields. Get the tech out there, gain experience.
Okay, primary first. What's the second prong?
Second, concurrently, they must continue the difficult, painstaking, long-term fundamental research needed for the secondary rechargeable systems. That means relentlessly working on developing stable lithium metal anodes, finding much better electrolytes, designing advanced separators that truly block the shuttle or manage interfaces, and engineering those complex conversion cathodes for long-term stability and efficiency.
So, short-term wins with primary, long-term grind on secondary. The brief does end on a note of cautious optimism, though, citing industry support.
Yes. It mentions that investment and interest from major established Li-ion companies, names like Samsung and Sony are mentioned, is expected to help accelerate commercialization efforts, particularly for Li-S, which is seen as technologically closer to being ready.
What are they banking on?
They seem to be banking on gradual performance increases, especially in anode protection technologies, spilling over from other research areas, to eventually overcome the remaining hurdles. But the final consensus in the brief remains pretty clear. This is still a long journey ahead before either Li-S or Li-O2 can realistically hope to replace commercial Li-ion batteries in mass market applications like electric vehicles. Patience is required.
What an incredible deep dive into the world of conversion chemistry. It really feels like the biggest challenge, as we've heard again and again, often isn't reaching that amazing theoretical potential on paper.
No, the theory is the easy part sometimes.
Right. It's managing the incredibly complex, dynamic, often messy electrochemistry happening right at the interfaces. That dance between the lithium anode, the polysulfides in Li-S, the oxygen and peroxides in Li-O2, and the electrolytes trying to hold it all together. We are truly moving, aren't we, from the relatively simple physics of intercalation chemistry
Where lithium ions just neatly slide into these pre-existing crystal cages in Li-ion.
to the messy, volatile world of conversion chemistry in Li-S and Li-O2, where the active materials themselves are dissolving, reacting, and depositing completely, changing form constantly.
It really is a complete paradigm shift in how the battery functions internally. In Li-ion, the cathode structure is largely stable, it's just a host. In these new systems, the core components are dissolving and reforming constantly, cycle after cycle. And that makes achieving stability and long life infinitely harder to guarantee over hundreds or thousands of cycles. The whole future of next-gen energy storage really hinges on whether we can successfully tame that dynamic chemical instability.
Which brings us, as always, to a final provocative thought for you, our listeners, to chew on. Reflecting on everything we've discussed, if that fundamental lithium dendrite problem, the chronic chemical disease that's common to both Li-S and Li-O2 systems, were somehow fundamentally solved, let's imagine we achieve a perfectly stable, high-capacity, long-lasting lithium metal anode. Which of these two next-generation technologies do you think would ultimately deliver the biggest revolution in global energy storage? Would it be the practical potential of Li-S, maybe hitting that 800 Watt-scale mark? Or would it be the truly astronomical potential of Li-O2, aiming for 1700 Watt-scale, or perhaps even more? Which breakthrough would change the world more?